Have you ever been in a huge crowd of people? Now, most of us have been in crowds before. I mean, maybe you went shopping on Black Friday, or you go to a high school football game and there's a crowd of people there or something. Most of us have been in crowds before, but I'm talking about a huge crowd of people. When I was in high school, our youth group took a mission trip to Canada. And as we were coming home, we stopped in New York City. So we could say that we did, I guess. I don't know why, but we did. And that was a crowd. I can remember walking through Times Square and riding on a subway and Grand Central Station and all. And everywhere I went, it seemed like there was 1 million of my closest friends right there beside me. You couldn't move or turn, and if you stopped to look for directions or something like that, you're going to get plowed over. And it got really bad for the week that I was misplaced from the 4 true friends that I had. We were only there for half a day, but it was only a couple minutes that I was lost from them, but it seemed like a week, okay? But you know what I'm saying? Strange things can happen when you're in a crowd. Another time in high school, our youth minister had this brilliant idea that he was going to take us to downtown San Antonio on New Year's Eve for the big celebration and everything. And it was a lot of fun. They had this stage set up there by the Alamo, and bands were playing and all. We were having a real good time, and all of a sudden, I got really cold and my back got really wet, and it wasn't that hot. It was coat weather, jacket weather actually, and I was wearing a jacket and my back got real wet, and I thought, what happened? And apparently the friend behind me had either got pushed or more likely stumbled into me, and I now had an entire cup of beer on my back. Try explaining that to your youth minister when you want to get back on the bus. I promise it wasn't me. And of course, my friends that were with me, yeah, Carl. Strange things can happen when you're in a crowd, but and some people don't like crowds for that reason. They won't go to a football game or a baseball game or a basketball game or anything because of the crowd of people that will be there. I personally enjoy the crowd, watching the people cheer and boo and say weird things to the referees. Even when I was a referee, I enjoyed that because they were just showing how much they don't know the rules. It was really funny, and it was a lot of fun. Another reason that I enjoy crowds is because they provide remarkable anonymity. I guess I said that right, maybe. I don't know. But you can go unnoticed in a crowd. When there are people all around you and they are all there for some purpose other than to watch you, well, you can do things you wouldn't normally do, both good and bad. And that's what a woman once thought, too. She thought that a crowd would allow her to go unnoticed. If you would open up your Bibles to Mark chapter 5. Hey, Colby, why don't you look on there for Sunday PM sermon and call that up for me if you don't mind. Mark chapter 5. In Mark chapter 5, we are told that that there was a crowd of people that were with Jesus. They were on their way to the home of Jairus, the synagogue ruler. Probably there were hundreds of people around, if not more than hundreds. And there was a woman, though. And this woman had her eyes fixed on Jesus. She wanted to see, she didn't just even want Jesus to see her. She saw where Jesus was, and she had a plan. You see, she had a problem. For 12 long years, she had been bleeding. 12 years. She had been to every doctor that she could find, every specialist that she could find, and yet instead of growing better, she got worse. She had spent all the money that she had, and perhaps even more, going deep into debt, trying to figure out this thing and trying to get cured. But her purpose, when thinking about Jesus, her purpose was clear, was singular. I just need to touch the hem of his garment, the edge of his clothes. That's all I've got to do is just touch him, and I will be cured. So she did. Somehow she weaved her way through that crowd of people until she maybe was just in the second row, we might say, as they're walking toward Jairus' house. And you can see her as she stretches past that person and just reaches out, and she does it. Excuse me. She touches Jesus. And I imagine it was just a touch and then pushed away by someone else or by a security guard or something, pushed her out of the way. But guess what? Mark 5:29 tells us immediately her bleeding stopped. It wasn't just that it slowed and then eventually got better over time. Immediately her bleeding stopped. But then something amazing, absolutely amazing happens. If you would look at Mark chapter 5, verse 30. It says this, "At once Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, 'Who touched my clothes?'" Did you catch that? Who touched my clothes? Trampled beneath the mob of people all surrounding Jesus, all of them just trying to touch Jesus. She probably barely heard when Jesus stopped and said, "Who touched me?" The disciples questioned the logic of such a question. And look at verse 31. "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" Who touched you? What kind of question is that, Jesus? In fact, Luke tells us that Peter was the one who asked the question. And knowing what we know about Peter and his foot and mouth disease, you can see Peter doing this, saying, Jesus, the better question is, who didn't touch you? Okay? Everybody's trying, we're trying to keep them away, I promise, okay? But Lord, we just can't all the time, and someone's going to get through, and we take care of that as quick as we can, but people are going to touch you. If you're going to be a public figure, you got to figure that out and know that people are going to try to touch you. And Jesus says, "No, Peter. I mean, somebody touched me. I felt the power leave." Well, we know the rest of the story. The woman comes forward and confesses. Jesus compliments her faith and tells her to go home. And I can almost, as she is making her way back through the crowd, I can almost hear Jesus saying to his disciples, explaining to them that there's a difference in the touch of someone in a crowd bumping up against you and in someone really, truly touching you. Jesus was always touching people. He was always touching people. He just was. And they wanted to touch him too. Think about the leper, a man with leprosy, Matthew chapter 8, verse 3. Now there's more to this than may meet the eye. Because you see, leprosy was one of those diseases that people were terrified of. I guess it was kind of like AIDS or Ebola today. They didn't really fully understand what was happening, what was going on, and they didn't want to get too close to it. Surely they didn't want to touch it. In fact, if you had leprosy or any skin disease, You were often ostracized from the town that you lived in. And the law required you, as people were coming by, that you shout out, "Unclean, unclean," so that you warned them away. There was a great fear of it being contagious, spread just by casual contact. But Jesus touched a leper. He touched two blind men, Matthew 9:29. Two blind men that people never really even gave a thought to. And yet Jesus touched them. Matthew chapter 14, verse 36 tells us all who touched him were healed. In the garden, when another mob was around Jesus, this time though they weren't quite cheering him on, they were there to arrest him. And Peter cut off Malchus's ear. Jesus touched the man's ear. That bloody ear that was on his head, Jesus touched the man and healed him. And he didn't wear plastic gloves when he did it. Yet he touched the man and restored it to its place. Jesus took little children in his arms, Matthew chapters 9 and 10 tells us. Mark 6:56 says they all begged to let them touch him. Jesus was definitely a toucher. A while back there was a long distance company, back when people worried about long distance. And they had this slogan and this phrase, "Reach out and touch someone." Y'all remember that? I like that. It's a necessary thing. When Jesus was questioned about who is the greatest in Matthew chapter 18, he called a little child, took him into his arms, and maybe he pulled the child onto his lap like Mark 9:36 tells us. And he says in Matthew 18:3 and 4, "I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." I can see Jesus, though, not just taking him on his knee and saying those few sentences and then putting the child back down and saying, "Run along now." I see him taking that child and bouncing him on his knee a little bit. I see him hugging on him, playing with him a little bit. It seems like there is a distance phenomenon among us humans. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean we stand apart. We stand apart more than we stand together. We might extend, excuse me, we might extend out our hand briefly for a quick handshake, but if that person that we're shaking hands with doesn't give us our hand back after one or two up and down motions, we get a little nervous, don't we? Yes, we do. I mean, because that's getting too close. Get a few of us in an elevator together. Wow. We don't know what to do. We just look at the floor. Or people look up and they watch the numbers go up and they say, "Oh, no, don't stop her, don't stop her, don't stop her." And then they hear ding! And it's your floor and you survived another close encounter with other people. And this is okay. I mean, the way that our society has blossomed, you can't be too careful around strangers. I understand that. But by the same token, how are strangers going to become friends if we don't open up to them and let them in our lives? But what's bad is not that this happens in elevators or other public places. What happens is we sometimes also let it happen in close relationships. In relationships where we shouldn't necessarily have to be afraid. For example, with people at church, we close down a little bit because, church, we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, but, if I get too close to you, you might get too close to me, and I might learn things about you, and you might learn stuff about me that I don't really want anybody to know about me, and so I'm just going to kind of keep my distance. Or even in our own families. And it's a shame. It really, truly is. My family has some friends that moved to Pennsylvania. And on one occasion, they had come back to San Antonio to visit, and they were staying with my parents. And at the time, Monica and I were living in Canyon Lake, Texas, which is about maybe from here to Fayetteville, from San Antonio and all. And so we went and we were having dinner, and the lady was talking about how when they go to church in Pennsylvania, their church home where people know them, they'd been up there for 6 months, 8 months or something, and these people know them, and yet they feel lucky if someone will even shake their hand, let alone give them a hug. And that's tragic. We sometimes will put on our signs that advertise the church. The churches of Christ salute you. Romans 16:16b. And there's always a big B on the sign. Not the buzzy kind of B, the letter B. Romans 16:16b. Did you ever stop and wonder why that B is so important? Well, because Romans 16:16a says, greet one another with a philemati hagio. Huh? What was that? Greet one another with a holy kiss. Holy what? Holy cow! In the first century, people didn't just shake hands. They gave holy kisses. And yes, even the men did this, and not just to attractive women, okay? It was a custom thing. It was the equivalent of our handshakes today. But I know a man who, he was the evangelism minister at a congregation. And he was good at it too. And he had evangelized a young lady, very attractive young lady. And she had come to church one Sunday morning, and he walked up to her, and he was known for doing that. I mean, he passed out holy kisses like some people pass out candy. Larry, I'm looking at you, buddy. Okay. And so he walked up to this woman that he had recently studied with and baptized, and gave her a kiss on the cheek. He wasn't aware that her husband was behind her. And her husband was big. I'm not talking just tall-wise. I'm talking he was big, wide, too. And there wasn't an ounce of fat on him, okay? And, I was watching this from across the foyer, and, you could tell this guy was wondering who this stranger was that was kissing his wife. Well, before he could, this minister was also our song leader, and, we almost didn't have a song service, but before that could happen, the woman calmed him down a little bit and everything. And wouldn't you know it, about 3 weeks later, the man was baptized too. So, but that's how it works. In fact, doctors and psychologists alike are speaking up today about the value of touch. In some cities, they have started these things that they call hug clubs. And they print up T-shirts where the back of the T-shirt says 12 hugs a day minimum. 12 hugs a day minimum on the back. It just might be a better world if everybody got at least a dozen sincere hugs from their fellow man every day. What a great place it would be to live in if everyone experienced the sincere, loving touch of a fellow human being at least 12 times a day. Now, please understand, by sincere, loving touch, I don't mean anything sexual in nature, okay? That's not what we're talking about. That's one of the biggest reasons that we don't hug, that we don't touch, is as much as we should, because we connect hugging, or touching, especially hugging, to flirting. And flirting, in our society today, is connected to sexual harassment. And sexual harassment is connected to lawsuits. And so we don't want to get sued, so we don't touch like we should. There's a couple of tragedies in some marriages. One is that in sexual relationships between some married couples, there's not much tender hugging going on in the act itself. And in fact, outside the act itself, there's very little other touching goes on between spouses. It seems like the longer you're married, the less you want to show affection in public. So you don't hold hands anymore, or you don't kiss anymore in public, or you don't show that affection. And it kind of goes up and down a little bit. You know, right when you get married, you're way up here, and then over time it starts to go down, and then you hit you bottom out, I guess we could say, and then it starts to get better as the years go by. But it's tragic indeed. So touch who? No? And how and when? Well, certainly touch your loved ones. Touch your spouse, your kids, your friends and relatives, the people who are close to you. Touch them. And how should you touch? Excuse me. How should you touch? Well, give actual hugs. You know, don't settle for the bro hug, you know, with one arm and pat him twice on the back and yeah. Don't settle for that, you know. That's silly. Give actual hugs, warm hand clasps. Put a hand on their shoulder. Let them know that you really, truly appreciate them. And when should you hug? Or when should you touch? Or when it's appropriate. And there's so many times when it's appropriate. Really. Hug at church. When you see someone from church in the grocery store, give them a hug. You know, that's going to cause some people to look weird at you. But you know what it might also cause them to do? It might also cause them to say, hey, I want that. I want that. I want to be in a place where I can get that type of touch, that type of attention, that type of a relationship. Don't just save hugs for birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas, and the like. Hug every chance you get. You know, you'll feel better even if you already feel great. So don't save hugs for special occasions. Make every occasion special by giving hugs. There are times after services when I'll be talking with someone and maybe a visitor, and I'll feel someone, they'll come and they'll tap me on the shoulder. And sometimes they'll drag that touch across my back. And I don't know who it is. By the time I turn around, they're long gone. But I do appreciate it because there's just something about touch. And now a word from our sponsor. VBS. This year, July 18th through 22nd. Mark your calendars. Don't go on vacation that week. Plan to be here. We're going to have a lot of kids come here, maybe some of them for the first time. And many of them are going to come from homes where the only touch that they've ever felt is a hand on their backside or perhaps even across their face. Many of them have never been touched out of love before. And it's amazing to see a kid that comes from a home like that, from Monday through Friday, and the progress and how at first they don't know how to react to an adult who's not treating them like they're just some sort of an inconvenience. But then as the week goes on, they begin to crave that and they begin to like it and they want more. But you know, there are so many different ways of touching that include no physical contact. Call it non-physical touching. Smiles. Smiles are really non-touching hugs. I'm sure that all of us have had the experience of a really bad day. Nothing's working out. Nothing's going our way. It is a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, and you think you're going to move to Australia, right? But then something happens. Someone flashes a smile at us, and our whole day changes. It gets so much better just because someone smiled. And by the way, who's to say that you're not that someone for someone else? So smile at people. Smile at them. The compliments are touch in a very real sense. Tell the person that you work for that they're a great boss, not trying to schmooze up to them or anything like that. Just say, hey, I want you to know it's a pleasure to work for you and all. And if you are the boss, tell the people that work for you that they're great employees, that they're a pleasure to have on your team and everything. Tell your family how much they mean to you. You ought to try to give at least 3 genuine compliments per day to people that you have contact with. You might say, well, that sounds easy. Well, good. Start tomorrow. Okay? 3 genuine compliments. And once you get that down and 3 is not a problem anymore, make it 4. And then 5, and then 6, and so on. And then there are little notes. Now, we all used to write notes when we were in school. Notice I said write notes, not take notes, right? We all used to write notes when we were in school. Why did we write notes? Well, because we had something so important to tell one of our friends that it couldn't wait. And that pesky teacher was talking about something, but we needed to talk to our friends. So we wrote them a note, folded it up, put their name on the outside, and pass it back, get it over to them. Teachers, they didn't have a clue what was going on, right? Right, yeah. That was the original text messaging, by the way. But we know that there's value to that. So if you notice someone is not at church, write them a note. Tell them that you missed them. Put it in the mail. Costs you 49 cents, and you won't get detention. Or send them a text message, or real text message now, or an email, or something to let them know that you missed them. Remember the birthdays and anniversaries of your brothers and sisters in Christ. Send them a card. Send flowers. Pick up the phone and just tell them you are thinking about them. These are all, quote unquote, non-touching hugs, and they work just like touching hugs work. There was a guy who lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he rented a park bench. And every week he would have a different message for his wife put on that park bench. And every day she would drive by that park bench on her way to work, and she could see that, and she knew that her husband was thinking about her. Now, that could get expensive after a while, but this guy knows the value of touch. Surprise loved ones, workmates, friends with little gifts, flowers, books, and cards, and praise. What you're going to do is you're going to find that it pays far more than it costs. My dad used to do this. He worked for the Alamo Community College District in San Antonio. And that's a collection of 5 community colleges that are all in San Antonio, coincidentally. So, but there are hundreds of secretaries in that college district. And every secretary's week or administrative professional's week, whatever we want to call it, he would buy a bunch of little doodads, okay? And give them to every secretary that he knew. It could be something simple like, some secretaries have long fingernails, hard to open up soda cans and stuff. So one year he got little soda can opener things and he had printed on, thanks for your hard work, Dr. Jim Dye. And that was it. Or Happy Secretary's Week, or just some little message like that, and his name. He reaped the benefits of this all year long. Because see, what would happen is he would call the secretary's boss. But who answers the phone? Not the boss, the secretary does. And guess what? There could be a line of 6 or 7 people waiting on the phone to talk to this person. But guess what this secretary did? She moved my dad to the front of the line. And that was just one of the benefits. These little trinkets cost him between $160 and $200 a year, but they were worth a whole lot more than that. And not just to him either. I had the pleasure of working in the human resources for Alamo Community College District for about 9 months. And one of my jobs was to set up exit interviews. And when somebody was leaving the district, except if they had gotten fired, then the guy said, no, I'll take care of those. The head guy said, I'll take care of those, setting those up. But, if it was, a retirement or a resignation, I was supposed to call them and talk to them and set up a time to come and talk to human resources. Well, there was a secretary who was retiring after many years with the district. And when I called her to set up her exit interview, she said, are you the one that gives us those things every year? And I said, no, I think that's my father. And she said, well, I just want you to know. And she couldn't, you could tell the tears were just streaming down her face. And she said, nobody but him ever remembered me. And she said, and I would love to meet him someday and tell him. I said, well, I'll pass that on to him. And I told him, and then tears were rolling down his face too. So, but, because it was nothing. It was a little trinket, but it meant so much. But you know what? You really don't have to spend any money at all. Excuse me. Just treating people with respect is a fantastic way of touching them. When you call someone on the phone, even if you're complaining about something, a product or whatever, don't stomp and snort and rant and rave and yell and scream. I mean, first of all, in all likelihood, the person talking to you on the phone, it's not their fault, okay? Yelling at them is just going to make them on someone else's side, not your side. But calmly explain the problem and ask for a solution. So Jesus asked, who touched me? Not who brushed up against me in a casual way. Who deeply touched me? There's another type of touch I want to talk about, and that is the touch of influence. Our lives are changed by others and shaped by the way that others influence us. And likewise, others are changed by the way that we touch them, by the way that we influence them, by our contact with them. Like every hammer blow of a master sculptor, in both giving and receiving, we are shaping and being shaped by personal contact with others. That's why we have to watch everything that we say and everything that we do, because someone is always watching us. Teenagers. That's especially true to you. And I'm not talking about your parents always watching you. What I'm telling you is there are younger kids here. And those younger kids are watching you. And they're seeing how you behave in church. They're seeing how you behave when you're not in church. And that's how they're going to behave. Because that's how the big kids are doing it. So you have to be very careful about the example that you set. And parents, it's the same with you. Your teenagers are watching you. They're learning from you how to respond, how to treat other people, and so forth. The power of influence is so great that Jesus said, let your light shine before men that they might see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven, in Matthew 5, verse 16. So realize the power that you possess by your touch, even if it's not physical touch. Use it wisely. Use it freely. But most importantly, use it to bring God glory. After all, Jesus touched us. As Jesus touched us, so we should touch other people. Jesus influenced us. He influenced us by dying on the cross. All He asks us in return is for us to give our lives to Him. Have you given your life to Him? If you have you since tried to take it back? If so, I urge you, let Him reach down and touch you again. Let Him show you the type of person that you need to be, and then strive always to be that type of person. If we can help you with that in some way through a public response this evening, please don't leave here without that need being met. But come to the front now as we stand and sing together.